to Jimmy Lee Jackson's death, SCLC proposed a symbolic march that would begin in Selma and travel 54 miles to the capital in Montgomery.
So agreeing to go to Montgomery was that kind of tool that would absorb a tremendous amount of energy and effort, and it would keep the issue of disenfranchisement before the whole nation. And the whole point was of walking from Selma to Montgomery, it'd take you 5 to 6 days, and which would give you the time to discuss in the nation through the papers, radio, television, and going around speaking what the real issues were.
Governor Wallace was determined that the march would not take place.
Such action would not be allowed on the part of any other group of citizens or non-citizens of the state of Alabama, and will not be allowed in this instance. The government must proceed in an orderly manner, and lawful and law-abiding citizens must transact their business with the government in such a manner. There will be no march between Selma, Alabama, and Montgomery, and I have so instructed the Department of Public Safety.
Despite the governor's ban, 600 people gathered at Brown Chapel AME Church on Sunday, March 7th, to begin the march to Montgomery. Dr. King was preaching in Atlanta. Hosea Williams and John Lewis led the march. Lewis chose to march even though his organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, opposed SCLC's strategy and decided not to take part. Surprisingly, as they walked through the center of town, there were no police in sight. The route out of Selma crossed over the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Cheyenne and I went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There, where I turned around and left Cheyenne. So because I'm telling you, I was afraid.
Waiting on the other side were Alabama state troopers, under orders from Governor Wallace to stop the marchers. Clark's posse was on the sidelines.
It'll be detrimental to your safety to continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You have to disperse. You are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church. This march will not continue. Is that clear to you? I've got nothing further to say to you.
All I could remember was outburst of tear gas and I saw people being beaten, and I began to just try to run home as fast as I could. And as I began to run home, I saw horses behind me, and I will never forget, a freedom fighter picked me up, Hosea Williams, and I told him to put me down. He wasn't running fast enough. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran.
We were about 2 blocks away from the bridge, and we went back to try to help people back. But the police were riding along on horseback, beating people, and the tear gas was so thick you couldn't get to where people were in need of help. And so we really had to turn the church into a hospital just to get people back to their senses, and it was a horrible 2 or 3 hours.
Shock gave way to anger. There was talk of retaliation.
There were people who came back to the church and started talking about going to get their guns. You had to talk them down. And you had to talk them down by simply asking questions. What kind of gun you got? 32, 38. How's that going to hold up against the automatic rifles and 10-gauge shotguns that they've got? And how many you got? There are at least 200, shotguns out there with buckshot in them. You ever see buckshot? You ever see what buckshot does to a deer? And most of them had. And you make people think about the specifics of violence, and then they realize how suicidal and nonsensical it is.
The day after Bloody Sunday, Governor Wallace reprimanded law enforcement officers for the scene on the bridge.
It was something that happened that enraged me, because I didn't intend for it to happen that way. But I didn't want them to get beyond that point where there were some people that told me there might be some violence.
Sunday night, the television networks broke into regular programming to show these scenes to a national audience. ABC interrupted its primetime movie, Judgment at Nuremberg, a film about Nazi war crimes.
When that beating happened at the foot of the bridge, it looked like a war that went all over the country. And then the wrath of the nation came down on us.
Governor Wallace had made clear his intention to prevent this march on the grounds of public safety and danger on the highways. And while we knew there would be a confrontation, state and local law enforcement officials were prepared for major disorder. We had no reason to believe that local law enforcement officials would set upon nonviolent and peaceful citizens in the way in which they did. On prior occasions, this has not occurred.
Shame on you, George Wallace, for the wet ropes that bruise the muscles, for the bullwhips that cut the flesh, for the clubs that broke the bones, and for the tear gas that seared the eyes and the nose and the nostrils and the lungs and choked people into insensibility. This is not the American way.
When this happened at Selma, and I saw it on television, to me it expanded beyond civil rights, beyond whether you vote or where you sit in a restaurant or in a cafe or on planes or trains or buses. It became a matter of human life, and it became an issue that transcended any of those we're voting on, became bigger than that.
After the beating on the bridge, we immediately sent out a call for our friends. We didn't think we could count on police protection. People said we should send in the National Guard. We didn't think that they would send in the National Guard to protect black people. And so we sent out a call to people of goodwill.
From all over the country, people came to Selma, among them 450 white clergymen.
We are a group of people, black and white, saying to us, we are here to share with the people of Selma in this struggle for the right to vote. We have seen on the television screen the violence that took place, and we're here to share with you.
So Governor Wallace, oh yeah, you never can tell us all. Governor
feel a change in the atmosphere, a spirit of inspiration, motivation, and seemingly hope coming back into the eyes and into the minds of these people, and then renewed commitment to the nonviolent method.
They planned to march on Tuesday, but President Johnson wanted them to wait until they could be sure there would be no violence. In Montgomery, another Johnson, federal judge Frank Johnson, banned the march pending a hearing. Dr. King had never violated a federal order, but there was increasing pressure to march, especially from SNCC.
My name is James Foreman. I'm the Executive Secretary of Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee.
The SCLC ministers left the decision about marching to King. The young members of SNCC, angered by Sunday's attack, wanted to be sure King wouldn't back down.
You know, federal injunctions and court injunctions have been handed down in the past, and it's really people here have to make up their minds and make certain decisions themselves about what it is that they want to do.
There was private disagreement, but public unity.
There's no disagreement between SNCC and SCLC, and that's not an issue here.
The announcement was made to the people in the audience that the march that Tuesday would go forward, all right? But some of us also knew that Dr. King had told, Judge Johnson, that he was going to call off the march. So we had a meeting from about 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock that morning where we were trying to lay out to him the necessity to keep his word to the people that the march would go forward and that it would not be called off.
We have no alternative but to keep moving with determination. We've gone too far now to turn back. And in a real sense, we are moving and we cannot afford to stop because Alabama and because our nation has a date with destiny.
Tuesday, March 9th, 2,000 marchers set out to cross the Pettus Bridge. This time, there were politicians, labor and church leaders, members of SNCC, the widow of a U.S. senator, and a few Southern whites. They were side by side with those who had been beaten 2 days earlier.
You are ordered to stop, stand where you are. This march will not continue.
The marchers asked to kneel and pray.
Because we know that America was founded on the principles that all men are created equal. Not just white men, but all men. We don't have much money, but we do have our bodies. And we lay them on the altar for thee and for our freedom today.
Then Dr. King turned the marchers around and walked back across the bridge. Some expressed relief, others shock.
All of a sudden I realized that the people in front were turning around and coming back. And I was aghast. What is going on? Are we not going to go through with this confrontation? What's happening?
The truth of it was that there was nothing much else to do. We'd been ordered by a judge not to go any further. If we had run into that police line, they would have beaten us up with court approval.
SNCC members would call the turnaround a sellout, worsening the split between them and SCLC. For others, there was a sense of confusion.
We waited to hear Dr. King's explanation of why this had been. We never fully understood. But what we did understand is saying, as many of you as can, could you stay a few more days? Could you remain? Well, most of us had come without even a toothbrush because we thought it was a one-day event. But nevertheless, a number of us decided to stay, I among them.
Later that evening, Reverend Miller, along with ministers Clark Olson and James Reeb, were returning from dinner. Unfamiliar with the town, they took a wrong turn past the Silver Moon Cafe.
And as we started walking from across the street, there appeared 4 or 5 white men. And they yelled at us, "Hey, you niggers." And we did not look across at them, but we just sort of quickened our pace. We didn't run, but continued walking in the same direction. And they apparently came across the street from our left and behind us. And one of them was carrying a club. And Clark said he turned around and saw the club just as it was swung. And Jim Reeb, being closest to the curb, caught the full impact of that blow.
James Reeb died 2 days later.
Ain't you got a right? 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 Ain't you got a right to the tree of life?
News of the attack provoked a national outcry. In many cities, demonstrators protested the violence in Selma.
Ain't you got a right? Ain't you got a right? Ain't you got a right to the tree of life?
Some blacks were angry that the death of a white minister stirred a nation that had ignored the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson.
What it seemed to me is that the movement itself is playing into the hands of racism. Because what you want is a nation to be upset when anybody is killed, and especially when one of us is killed. You understand? So it just played into the hands of racism, and it's almost like, for this to be recognized, a white person must be killed. Well, what are you saying?
When the police barricaded the area around Brown Chapel, SNCC withdrew from the Selma campaign in frustration. The barricades were to keep hostile whites out, the protesters in. One group, led by Jimmy Webb, broke free of the barricades. They were stopped by Clark's men.
I can't follow you, and I'm not going to follow you and give you personal protection. And I'm telling you, for your own benefit, you had better turn around and get out of this area. You're not going to the courthouse in a group under the condition that you come here, and I'll assure you that.
All we would like to do, sir, is to go to the
courthouse is closed. There's no business there.
We don't want to go in the courthouse. All we want to do is go to the lawn of the courthouse, kneel and prayer, and we'll gladly return.
You take your prayers back to your church. That's the proper place to pray.
Sir,
I'm sure that God will hear your prayer just as well down there as it will up here, but you're not going on this courthouse alone.
Sir, whenever there are men who are in sinful conditions, prayer should be uttered wherever they are.
Well, why don't you pray where you are? Go back down there and pray. You think you're lily white? You think you're not sinful? Well, then go back to your church and pray.
Well, sir, can we pray together, you and I?
You do your praying. I do mine, big boy. You don't pray for me. I don't want you to pray for me.
Well, will you pray for us?
Because I don't think your prayers get above your head.
Well, will you pray for us?
No, I'm not going to pray for you. I'll tend to my business, you tend to yours. Now, you better move these people out of here.
Sir,
we're trying to protect you.
Sir,
You know how to love before you
sir,
I don't have to love anybody I don't want to love.
Sir,
You do your own loving. You love your little niggas. I love who I please.
do you believe in equal justice for all?
I believe in justice.
Do you believe in equal justice?
I don't believe in equal nothing. There's no two people in this world alike, and they're not equal under any terms or conditions. There's no two peas in the world alike. No two pieces of money nor nothing else.
Then, sir, are you saying that if I have a quarter and I'm black and you have a quarter and you white, then my quarter isn't as worth as much as your
That's
quarter?
your quarter.
My quarter is worth?
I'll decide what my quarter is worth. You use yours and I'll use mine.
You buy you a catfish sandwich and yours.
I have nothing else to say.
What's the deal here now? You people in this small group want to turn and walk on back to the group. The rest of the group's down there waiting on you.
We have your protection.
We'll do everything we can. Just go on back down there. You didn't have it coming up here.
Plans for the march to Montgomery remained at a standstill pending a federal court decision. Now protecting the marchers became an issue for both President Johnson and Governor Wallace.
We got to report how much it would take to guarantee absolute protection from everyone, and we didn't have the resources. So I called on President Johnson in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution to send us troops to help us maintain order.
Wallace met with President Johnson in Washington on March 13th.
What happened in the meeting was that the president totally snowed him. Governor Wallace didn't quite grovel, but he was so pliant by the end of the 2 hours, with President Johnson putting his arm around him and squeezing him and telling him it's a moment of history, and how do we want to be remembered in history? Do we want to be remembered as petty little men, or do we want to be remembered as great figures that faced up to our moments of crisis and that kind of thing? And then he led Governor Wallace out in the hopes that Governor Wallace, who was by that time like a rubber band, would give a press statement that confirmed his determination to protect the marchers at Selma, comply with the court order from Judge Johnson, and act like a responsible governor.
Well, all I can say is that I am very hopeful that we can have a solution to the problems that confront us in this regard, and I did request, I did make some suggestions, and I hope that we can have a cessation sometime of the demonstrations, although I recognize the right to peacefully assemble, but I do think there are limitations, but that's all.
Can you tell us, Governor, what the
Governor Wallace still refused to pay for protecting the marchers. President Johnson, sensing the mood of the country, addressed Congress on national television.
What happened in Selma is part of a far larger movement which reaches into every section and state of America. It is the
8 days after Bloody Sunday, 4 days after Reeb's death, the president asked for a comprehensive voting rights bill and astonished the nation by using the words of the movement.
Their cause must be our cause too. Because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
Lyndon Johnson came on, the late president, and said, "We shall overcome." And that's just like you'd stuck a dagger in your heart or something like that. I mean, what's this guy doing? And, you had respect for your country. The South's very patriotic, but it just destroyed everything you'd been allegedly fighting for.
We were all sitting around together, and Martin was sitting in a chair looking toward the TV set. And when LBJ said, "And we shall overcome," we all cheered, and I looked over toward Martin, and Martin was very quietly sitting in the chair, and a tear ran down his cheek. It was a victory like none other. It was an affirmation of the movement.
But SNCC didn't see any victory. In Montgomery, where they had moved operations, they were being beaten by Alabama police as they tried to confront Governor Wallace.
There's only one man in this country that can stop George Wallace and those posses. We can present thousands and thousands of bodies in the streets if we want to. And we can have all of the soul force and the moral commitment around this world. But a lot of these problems will not be solved until that shaggably over place called the White House begins to shake and gets on the phone and says, "Now listen, George, we coming down there and throw you in jail if you don't stop that mess." That's the only way it's going to be stopped. It's not just the sheriff of this county or the mayor or the police commissioner or George Wallace. This problem goes to the very bottom of the United States. And you know, I said it today and I will say it again. If we can't sit at the table, let's knock the fucking legs off. Excuse me.
There are points that we agree on, and there are still points that we must negotiate before we come to a final resolution of the problem.
Martin Luther King tried to calm the situation in Montgomery while waiting, still, for the court decision on the march.
Pull it back. Let me give you this statement, which I think will come
Get the mic down.
as an expression of deep joy to all of us. Judge Johnson has just ruled that we have a legal and constitutional right to march from Selma to Montgomery.
The judge's action cleared the way for the march, but Governor Wallace still refused to provide the necessary protection. So President Johnson federalized the Alabama National Guard. Sunday, March 21st. Only 62 days after the campaign began, 3,200 people gathered at Brown Chapel Church for the journey to Montgomery.
We are going to walk non-violently and peacefully to let the nation and the world know that we are tired now. We've lived with slavery and segregation 345 years. We waited a long time for freedom. We are trying to remind the nation of the urgency of the moment. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to transform Alabama, the heart of Dixie, to a state with a heart for brotherhood and peace and goodwill. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
We're marching on to freedom land. We're marching on to freedom land. Cause our strength from day to day as we walk the narrow way. We're going forward. We're going forward. One day we're going to be.
In the video, you see one cop, but it's another police cruiser that just pulled up. But that cop right there that's walking away, that's the actual cop that shot Mike. But he comes back over there in a minute. I started recording on my balcony. That's the first video that I have, which is before the yellow tape was put up. I ran out the door, and I ain't even had no shoes on, socks on. When we got to the scene, they was just putting the tape up around him.
Like shit, I'm hitting that man, I'm hitting, but he kept shooting him.
I can't even describe how it felt just looking at him laying there. It's constantly blood just running from his body to the side of the street. And I think really they should have covered him up at that time, because his grandmama looking at him and kids looking at him, you know, it's a dead kid.
Believe it was one of his relatives ran over and tried to see who it was, and the first cop, St. Louis County cop, I believe, ran to him and told him to get away. This is a crime scene, and you can't be here. And it was not pretty. They had no sympathy. It just seemed like they had no sympathy. They had these blank expressions on their face.
Until the medical examiner gets there to do their investigation, that body should not move. The crime scene is the crime scene one time. That's it. One time. You get one shot to do this. Once that body is moved, you've tampered with evidence.
No, I never seen a dead body like that. And it kind of weirded me out because I seen his brains and stuff like that on the ground. And to just see him the day before and to see him the next day dead, it was kind of like unreal. the people was just hollering, like, cover them up as kids and stuff out here. And at first they wasn't, you know, paying them no attention.
People start coming, they start coming, and they start coming, and as long as they let them lay there, surely more people came. Why are you letting them lay there like that? This is a crime scene. The tension was so high, so thick you can cut it with a knife.
And I just heard somebody say, kill the police, and I was like, oh my God.
We had a set of gunshots, maybe 2 shots, pow, pow. And then you have these extra sets of shots to go off. So now they go get their riot gear and their assault rifles. So now we feeling like, wait, hold on, you know, are we safe?
You know, and they bringing out dogs. They got their dogs barking at us, we done something.
You know, you want to get these things taken care of as quickly as possible. But when these guys arrive on scene, the investigators, the other policemen, they called for a code 1000. They're calling for 25 extra units plus 5 supervisors. So 30 extra people are being asked to control that crime scene because of all the chaos that's ensuing. Their investigation wasn't able to start for over an hour because they had to try to maintain the scene, spread that crime scene tape back out to try to get some calm to the area so they could actually investigate the shooting death of Mr. Brown.
This was a police shooting, and I know he had no weapon on him. So therefore, in this situation, you kind of figure out they trying to either plant something on him or trying to get their game plan together. So I think that's why everybody stood out there.
And then finally, one of the officers went and got a white sheet, and put it over him.
He had a pool of blood in front of him, a trail of blood. It was bead red when I got outside. By the time he was gone, it was black.
And he laid there, then they for 4 hours.
That moment, it just really kind of like eating me up. That image it just stuck in my mind. It just definitely stuck in my mind each and every day now.
The firemen came and washed the ground in between the cracks. His blood was still there. Even when all the cameras are gone, and it's still that mark.
We still hear our brothers crying, I can't breathe. Now we're in the struggle, singing, I can't leave. We're calling out the violence of these racist police, and we ain't gonna stop. We can't
take it no more. Can't take it no more. We can't take it no more. We can't take it no more. We can't take it no more.
We still hear our brothers crying, I can't breathe. Now we're in the struggle singing, I can't leave. We're calling out the violence of these racist police. And we ain't gonna stop till our people